Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of r/Entitled People Stories. Our first story we'll be reading today. My wife demands to dye our baby's hair. After that, am I the jerk for dropping my freeloading brother off at our aunt's house? And after that, stealing my girlfriend's Wi-Fi ended their relationship. Now for every thumbs up this video gets, one Karen does not get to dye her baby's hair. Baby Joker for the win. So please smash that like button. And subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. My wife demands to dye our baby's hair. My mom hates my wife, to the point no contact was the only choice. I'll admit I should have done it sooner, but it broke my heart. The relationship was so deteriorated that when I told my mom about the no contact, she said she didn't even care, as long as she never had to see my wife's face again. I haven't seen my mom in 2 years, with the exception of my sister's wedding. My wife and mother-in-law used to be close, but are having issues lately. Mother-in-law has become friends with my mom, despite knowing how my mom talks about her daughter. This obviously hurts my wife. My mom has dark red hair, closer to brown, maybe auburn is the right word, and I have slightly browner, but still some red in it. Mother-in-law is strawberry blonde, and my wife is regular blonde. My wife is currently pregnant. At the wedding we attended, someone who didn't know the situation asked my mom if she was excited to be a grandmother, and my mom said that she would not be meeting the baby and she didn't think of it as her grandchild. But then she turned to us, laughed, and said we might have a red-haired kid, and it's going to drive my wife crazy. My wife got so upset that we left the wedding. A few days later, my wife was talking to her cousin who is a hairdresser and asking if there's any non-harmful way to dye a baby's hair. She said no, and I interrupted and asked what it was about. My wife said that she was thinking, and it would hurt her mental health if our daughter looked like our mom's, mainly mine, and she was seeing if there was a way to dye her hair. I snapped at my wife that was crazy and selfish. Our baby isn't an extension of anyone, and her hair is her hair. My wife began to cry and said she wouldn't do it unless it was 100% non-harmful, which now she knows isn't an option. But I said it's more than that, and she shouldn't have even thought about it. She ended up crying for an hour, which she is struggling with the pregnancy hormones right now, but I feel awful. Not the jerk. Your wife needs therapy if her own kid's hair color is going to trigger her. Came to comment this. I was sympathizing with OP's wife up until that last bit. Her love for her baby should overpower her disdain for her mother-in-law. There should be no reason to dye the baby's hair, which puts that child at a massive risk for her mom projecting all that anger onto her. It should be monitored very closely. Wife needs to go zero contact with mother-in-law and her own mother. She probably needs therapy. I don't think she's the monster most commenters are making her out to be. I honestly don't think hair color is the real trigger. It's the idea that her mother and her mother-in-law will use the hair color as a weird, pathetic dig against her. She's pregnant, losing her mom, and worried her baby's appearance is going to be a way for people to be cruel. The real jerk here is your mother, absolutely vile. Your wife is pregnant and being harassed, and she needs you on her side. You absolutely should not let her dye your child's hair. That's ridiculous. But that's the sort of ridiculous thing an extremely stressed person is driven to do by an awful mother-in-law. Seriously, your mother is vile, and you need to make up with your wife and keep that jerk away from her. Well, what do you think? Is OP the jerk or not? Please let us know. Nothing wrong with Baby Joker. As long as it's green, I don't see the problem. Am I the jerk for dropping my freeloading brother off at our aunt's house? My older brother is a bit of a bum. It's mean to say, but it's true. He can never hang on to a job for longer than a couple years max, and when he inevitably loses whatever job he had, he starts mooching off family and friends until he can find another job months later. This entails him freeloading at their place, eating their food, using their stuff, etc. He's lost friends because of how long he bummed off of them, and I don't blame them for cutting him off. Well, this last time he lost his job, he went to our parents, but they didn't have room because they were letting our eldest brother's family stay with them after he and sister-in-law lost their jobs out of nowhere within the same month. Eldest brother's entire crew was laid off with zero warning, and sister-in-law's work burned down, and they couldn't afford the home they were renting anymore. So older brother was pretty much out of luck. So our parents, aunt, and uncle all started calling me, asking if I'd take him in just long enough so he could get on his feet again. I, stupidly, let myself feel bad for him and said okay, but he only had a few months to get another job or he was out on the street. They all said of course, and so he came to stay with me. And it was a nightmare. He's a slob. He never washes dishes, never washes his clothes, and eats pretty much whatever he wants. I guess since I'm his little sister, he figured he could ignore me, saying to get his crap together. Well, after 6 months, I told him he had to go, and gave him a couple weeks to find somewhere else. Well, it seems he called our parents and cried about me kicking him out, and they told him he knew he couldn't stay forever, but they also, of course, called my aunts and uncle and told them all about it. And my busybody aunt called me and scolded me for being cruel to my brother and abandoning family when they need help. I let her talk and finally said she was right. Helping family was important, and I'm glad she showed me that. She seemed glad I understood the right thing to do before hanging up. So I followed her advice and packed up my bro and drove him to her house. I couldn't take care of him anymore. He was running all my bills up, but my aunt made a good point. Family should help each other. So I dropped him off there. She has room since all her kids have moved out and then left. But I wasn't even halfway home before I was getting multiple calls from my parents and aunt. Parents were demanding to know why our aunt was blowing up their phones, and aunt was leaving voicemails shouting at me to come back and get my brother. I explained to my parents, and they said it was a good idea since aunt sounded like she wanted to help. But my aunt called me a jerk and said she didn't want my brother there. And when I told her family helps each other, she called me a jerk. Last I checked, he's still living with her. Am I the jerk? Sorry for my lack of replies. I answered what ones I could before I left for work, and when I got back, I had far too many to answer. Lots of people have been asking similar questions, so I thought answering them here once would be helpful. 1. My brother doesn't work menial jobs. He's not just hopping from one minimum wage job to another. He's working very good paying jobs, like electronic repair, automotive maintenance, etc. He's very skilled, but lazy. 2. No, my aunt hasn't spoken to me since she called me a name, then she hung up on me. 3. My brother has only been with her for about 3 weeks. He stayed with me for 6 to 7 months. 4. My brother was upset I was kicking him out initially, but in a better mood when he realized I had another place lined up for him to stay. Not sure how they're doing together since I haven't talked to her either since after I dropped him off. 5. No, my aunt isn't married anymore. Her and my uncle got divorced and he lives with his new wife, but I heard from Dad that he thought this was all hilarious. Not the jerk. Congratulations, you did exactly what Reddit always advises people in your situation. If they think helping family is so important, they can take care of the freeloading relative. Good job for being kind enough to give him a chance and for being strong enough to boot him out when you were fed up. OP. I'm pretty new to Reddit, so to hear that family being obnoxious like mine is quite common makes me sort of sad. Stick around. You'll see your exact story show up almost every day. It's sad that it's so common, but I find some comfort in the fact that so many of the problems here follow a pattern. We can start to see common pitfalls in modern living and how to address them. OP. An anonymous look at society through a microscope. I see. Hey, the internet's greatest use is as a tool of learning. For example, Reddit taught me to always document interpersonal incidents at work, or to never ever buy a house with a person you're not married to. There are valuable life lessons to be found. OP. Why would someone buy a house with someone they're not married to? Usually because they think marriage is a sure thing somewhere down the road. But again, as shown by Reddit, it's never too late for your significant other to turn out to be a jerk. So, best to be smart about your finances. Stealing my girlfriend's Wi-Fi ended their relationship. Backstory. After my girlfriend moved to her new apartment closer to both her sister and myself, she obviously wanted internet. Although she isn't fully tech-savvy, she does know her basics, and thus explicitly asked the provider if she should be worried about admin/admin kind of Wi-Fi protection. She was assured that it was all fully safe out of the box, no admin. In fact, just press a button to connect her laptop and her Wi-Fi network would be fully secured. The incident. So a few months or years later, my girlfriend started to notice that her internet speed went down. This became very apparent while video chatting with some of her family members in Japan. Like I said, my girlfriend knows her basics, so she knew that it didn't have to be the internet connection itself. It could also be her laptop, or maybe the network cables had eroded due to age. She decided to cover as many options as possible before contacting her ISP support desk, so she asked me to help. I'm a geek, and I worked within the field of ICT for over 30 years now, mostly as systems administrator, but also as IT manager or co-manager. So, visiting my girlfriend and getting to show off my IT skills. It took me a moment before I discovered the issue. Someone was leeching off her Wi-Fi. Technically, the ISP support staff were right. This wasn't an admin kind of thing anymore. It was completely randomized, sort of. You see, on their routers, the Wi-Fi password was the same as the random SSID, aka network name. What the heck? I was quite angry at both this incompetence as well as the blatant disrespect for my girlfriend's privacy. Maybe a bit too much, but yeah. Sure, for some people this is only about getting internet, but what many people overlook is that such leechers will also gain access to your private network. So basically, they could also access any public Windows or Mac shares that you may have active, not to mention any other connected devices. Fortunately, my girlfriend knew her basics, as I mentioned earlier, but I was still angry. The revenge. So I suggested something I had done earlier. Let's replace this crappy router for a professional device. In specific, the same kind of Zyxel router that I used at my home, so that we could set up a secured VPN between ourselves and get some other nice feats as well, like a private VoIP connection. She agreed, so we bought her a new router together. We're talking professional gear here. These things cost about as much as a high-end smartphone, so obviously we were going to split the costs, considering that a mid-level could also have helped her out. Now, even though I consider her previous router a piece of junk, I still have to admit that it did provide some useful features, like a syslog service. It could also use USB storage, so I turned on Wi-Fi logging, plugged in a large USB memory stick, and then we waited for the new router to arrive. Then I got to work. First, I set up my girlfriend with a nice hidden Wi-Fi network so that no one could easily find it. Next, we set up a much better security scheme, and then it was time to get even with the lowlifes. I set up a second Wi-Fi network, which was completely the same as the previous one, but this time I throttled it down a bit so that it couldn't usurp the full bandwidth. Then I added some specific DNS overrides. DNS is a service on the internet which translates names into IP addresses, which is what your computer needs to connect to something. You may care about reddit.com. All your computer cares about are the associated IP addresses. Thing is, this service can be easily overridden, and I had studied the logs, so I knew exactly which sites the lowlifes visited the most. So from now on, when they would go to their favorite site using this router, it would point your browser to something definitely not safe for work. Then it was time for their second favorite site. I redirected that one to another shady website. I also noticed that a certain web shop was sporadically used by the leechers, so I decided to redirect that one to a relationship counseling website. When you think your spouse is cheating on you, come to us. It was around that time when I noticed that my girlfriend's router was using a more modern firmware than I had on my router. This one also provided web redirection services. Companies can use this to redirect specific websites based on their URL to a local or remote web page. So, say you don't want your staff to use social media, then you could just tell your router to redirect, say facebook.com, to a local web page which explained the no social media allowed policy. Much to my delight, this service also supported a randomizer trigger. See, I still remembered a website from the early days of the internet, something so gross that it became a meme of its own. So I looked for and found a replacement, and then happily added that to a randomized redirection service. So every once in a while, the leechers would open their favorite websites, and no matter what kind of site they asked for, they'd always end up with something completely ridiculous on their screen. Then we waited. I need to point out that my girlfriend did not fully agree with some of my actions, especially when she learned of the aftermath. But we never had an argument over this, because she could also understand my point of view. Don't mess with my girlfriend. And she agrees that if you trespass, even in the digital world, then all bets are off and you lost your rights to a civil solution. Don't mess with a geek, okay? The aftermath. One day, my girlfriend got home from work and noticed a huge moving van outside. She gave it no further mind, but when she got to her front door, she noticed that her neighbor, 2 doors over, was moving out. She brought this up with her direct in-between neighbor a few days later, and as it turns out, things completely exploded over there. The shouting and accusations could even be heard through the walls. Seems the pair got into huge arguments about their choice of websites, and once the deed was done, there was no room left for any kind of reasoning. One of the two even accused the other of hacking the internet, because it was only after the first fallout that those goat pictures started to show up. As far as we know, they broke up. For the record, I regret nothing. I did remove the SSID for obvious reasons and also reset the DNS and forwarding sections, and now things are back to normal. More importantly, my girlfriend is still very happy with the router and the extra services to this very same day of writing. She's working her way up as a 3D artist, and the knowledge that all her work will be fully kept safe after she copies her projects onto my NAS is a deal breaker for her. Seriously, you guys, always remember that when you use someone else's internet connection, this includes free services, then you're fully relying on their goodwill. Such services could easily be misused as well, either through pranking like I did, or worse. Thanks for reading. Edit. Some points which people raised. This story didn't play out 30 years ago, at most 6. It was impossible for the couple to make an honest mistake. First, the Wi-Fi names, even default ones, would be far apart. Also, unlimited plans aren't common here, so one way or the other, they'd have seemed to be using zero data over the months this went on. Not to mention that their password would never have matched that of my girlfriend's, assuming of course they even had a subscription or the same ISP. As for me not caring at all about the aftermath, how entitled or unreasonable do you have to be to start accusing someone for opening up a website but then refusing to listen to further reason and instead start major drama? If they had both opened the same website, like the online store, then it would be immediately clear as to what had happened. This also leads up to the honest mistake. If it were an honest mistake, then wouldn't one of them have called their ISP to try and prove their point of being not guilty? At the very least, to complain about shoddy service? Instead, they tore each other a new one. So your Wi-Fi was being stolen, and your response wasn't to change the password or anything? Instead, it was to gaslight a couple and cause them to end their relationship? This is incredibly petty, and frankly, you are horrible. You were the worst person in this story. Sickening, to be honest. The smug satisfaction you seem to get from this makes me wonder how many other times you have used a minor transgression to justify your cruel behavior. So, they were just using the Wi-Fi and you caused them to break up? Yeah, you are a jerk. Congrats, I guess. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or the neighbors? Please let us know. Maybe if the neighbors hadn't been stealing Wi-Fi, none of this would have happened. Sometimes the people who comment on these stories have no common sense. Come on, Karen, this is Reddit. Definitely not the place to be looking for common sense. Am I the jerk for getting my neighbors fined by our HOA after they called my one problem a me problem? They're my direct next door neighbors. Many elderly and older couples live here, but there's been a rise in younger families with kids. My family being one to purchase about a year ago. Myself and my husband and our 2 kids. Our neighborhood has an HOA. Generally, they leave you alone if you don't cause any problems. Keep your lawn clean, avoid parking on the street for extended periods of time, don't paint your house a disapproved color, have any work on your house approved beforehand, and you're golden. I've heard some horror stories about HOAs, but ours is relatively lenient. We have a good relationship with our neighbors, up until now. Our neighbor's house was robbed when they were on vacation about a month ago. So they've installed security cameras, a security system, security lights, etc. The problem is that one of their security lights shines into my son's bedroom at night. It's on constantly, but turns extra bright if it senses movement. Thing is, this light is the most sensitive light ever made. I swear, just a little bug or some wind will set it off. It's bright as heck and wakes up my son, who's 4.5, even with his shutters shut, because it's so bright. So after a week of this, I went to my neighbors and spoke to them. The husband said to me, word for word, "I'm sorry, but that sounds like a you problem." I kept my composure and asked him if he had properly filed with the HOA before installing these new additions. He said it wasn't an addition, just some lights, so he didn't need their approval. I asked him to please just adjust the light so that it would point away from my son's window, and he said no and asked me to leave. Mad as heck, I talked to my husband about it when he got home. He couldn't believe our, up to now, very nice neighbors would be that inconsiderate, so we contacted the HOA. The very next day, I recognized the head of our HOA's car outside their house. I eavesdropped from our balcony, and she's ripping them a new one. Apparently, they had new windows and front doors installed and didn't have it approved through HOA beforehand. They also built an addition into their backyard, and that wasn't approved either. So they'll be receiving several heavy fines from the HOA, in addition to being required to adjust their security lights as to prevent them from disturbing the neighbors. His wife came over yesterday and laid into me about the fines we imposed on them and said we could have handled this without getting the HOA involved. I told her I'd tried to handle the security light issue with her husband, but he told me it was a me problem. She insisted she knew nothing about that. I could hear them very loudly fighting shortly after. Apparently, I ruined an important anniversary between them. I'm sorry, but that sounds like a you problem. Our other neighbors heard about it, and today it's 50-50, me versus neighbors being the jerks. So, am I the jerk? Not the jerk. You tried talking to him and being reasonable and turned your problem into a bigger problem for him when he basically told you off. Sucks to be him. Yeah, sucks to be him until he notices OP making any changes to their home. He's gonna be running those to the HOA so fast, OP's head will be spinning. OP, we have made changes, including adding on a balcony and changing out some old windows. We went through the HOA to get it approved. We have a very solid relationship with the head of our HOA, as she's my mother-in-law's longtime friend, and we've been stellar residents. I don't doubt that him or other neighbors will try to put the hammer down on us, but they'll be out of luck. We actually read the HOA guidelines and follow the weekly newsletters. Not the jerk. Make sure you have all of those approvals in writing in the formal HOA-approved manner. Had a friend who made changes only to have the HOA try to rescind. They had proof, so we're fine, but it took a letter from a lawyer to make them take a seat. You are not the jerk, but be prepared just in case. Good luck. Not the jerk. You had no way of knowing all the other crap they did without HOA approval. Their actions were negatively affecting your kid, and they decided to be jerks about it when you tried to bring it up. You didn't ruin their anniversary, their marriage did. HOAs are disgusting control-freak groups. I side-eye anyone who talks about them positively. That being said, this particular instance, OP is not the jerk, but I'd be careful, as now your neighbor and anyone who sides with them is going to be onto the HOA if you do anything to your home they don't like. I doubt you'll be speaking so highly of such a controlling body then. It's laughable that random people, the HOA, who happen to live nearby others think they have the right to control what other people do with their own home over things like installing a new door or choosing a paint color uptight people don't like. HOAs are a joke that isn't funny. Using them to your own advantage this once, it could backfire in the future, by the way. Be wary. HOAs are one of the dumbest things I've ever heard of in my life. Why do Americans do that? OP, is it an American thing? I really don't know. I've lived in the USA all my life. Do neighborhoods in other countries have some form of an HOA? I'm from Brazil. HOAs here exist only in apartment buildings or gated communities, and mostly only exist to talk about things related to everyone, like elevators, gates, playgrounds, and set some rules on noise, like no noise after 10 p.m. You can pretty much do anything on your property. One thing I find funny is that many Americans say that they have freedom yet can't paint their own house any color they like, or swap doors and windows, or put things in their own garden. Like, why do you guys put up with this? Just to be clear, most homes in the US are not part of an HOA, which means most US homeowners can paint their house, swap doors, etc. without issues. People choose to live in a setting that feels the best for them. Those who choose an HOA setting enjoy the benefit of a set standard that all in the community agree to live by. As evidenced in this case, neighbors also have a quick resource to help settle disputes. There are pros and cons to all living arrangements. I set my classmate up to fail. A couple of years ago, I was studying at university. I've always done well in school, and I'm the kind of person who tends to end up running the group during group assignments. In one of my classes, I ended up in a group along with 7 others, so in total, there were 4 women and 4 men. Every week, we'd have an assignment that we got to spend Monday through Thursday preparing for, and then on Friday, we'd meet up for a seminar with the other groups as well as the teachers to present our work. Out of the 8 members, 7 of us took it seriously. One of the men was always, and I do mean always, late. Not 10 to 15 minutes, more like 45 to 90 minutes. At first, bad teammate blamed it on getting lost trying to find us, which didn't make sense because the setup was that the teachers booked rooms for each group to prepare in, and we always had the same room. Everyone knew where it was, right next to our main lecture hall, which this guy didn't have any issue locating because he showed up for lectures. Then he said he had misread the schedule and thought we started an hour later, but just like with the room, it was the same time every day. When bad teammate finally did show up, It became clear he hadn't read the literature or taken any notes, and the rest of us had to spend half our time explaining the very basics to him instead of doing the actual assignment, and then stress/work late in order to finish. Normally, I don't mind helping people with school. I know sometimes people struggle, whether it's due to learning disabilities, health issues, family problems. I've been in that position myself. What I do hate is people who try to weasel their way out of doing anything simply because they don't feel like it, but then still expect full credit. Still, we as a group tried to give this guy the benefit of the doubt. We checked in with him, offered to explain the assignments, reminded him which chapters were needed to read, and so on. It didn't help. Every Friday seminar, the teachers had a list with all of our names. Everyone had to make at least one comment/answer one question in order to get a passing grade. Higher grades, of course, required more participation, but that was the minimum. So when one of us spoke, the teacher crossed us off the list. When there was around 15 minutes left, the teachers would call out the names of those who hadn't participated and remind them that if they didn't speak, they'd receive a failing grade and have to do an individual written assignment to make up for it. Every week, bad teammate got called out, and every week he kept quiet. After about a month of this, I started to think that maybe this guy had a severe phobia of public speaking and that he was intentionally failing so that he'd get to do written assignments instead. It was sad, but I didn't know what else to do since none of our previous attempts at supporting him had worked. Our last seminar was a bit different from the others. We were still allowed to prepare in groups if we wanted to, but at the seminar, everyone was expected to present individually. Our group agreed to do most of the prep on our own and then just meet up for a quick check-in before the seminar. During this meeting, it became clear that we had misinterpreted some of the questions and we hurried to fix it. Again, bad teammate was super late. He showed up as we were still correcting our answers, but he must have thought we were all done because he said, "Sorry I'm late. I guess I missed the prep, so if one of you could just take pictures of your notes and send it to me, that would be great." We all went quiet for a moment. Then we told him that no, we actually weren't quite done yet, so it would be great if he could sit down and help correct the last couple of questions. Bad teammate looked nervous at that, then said sure, he just had to run to the bathroom first. He disappeared for another 20 minutes, and when he came back, he tried the same thing again. "You're probably done with the prep now, so just send me the notes." Before we could say anything, the teachers called us inside. Bad teammate didn't get our notes, and, predictably, he didn't say a word during this seminar either. Fast forward a couple days later, and bad teammate starts texting me, asking for my notes from all the seminars because he totally took notes each time, he just forgot to save the document on his computer, and now he has to hand in 7+ written assignments to make up for the seminars. I was visiting family at the time, so I told him, truthfully, that I didn't have access to my notes because they're all by hand and I didn't bring my notebooks. He kept insisting that I give him my notes. I later found out he had been pestering the other girls in the group too for their notes, but not the boys. At this point, I was very tired and irritated, so I decided to send him some notes, just not the ones he wanted. Remember the last seminar, where we had realized that we had misunderstood some of the questions and gotten the answers completely wrong, so we had to correct them right before walking into the classroom? I compiled our incorrect answers, threw in some other unrelated stuff for good measure, and sent it to him. He sincerely thought I had just handed him the perfect cheat sheet that he could just copy. I don't think he passed. Edit. When the next semester started, he never showed up for registration. Heard later from another classmate that he had dropped out, but they found it more likely he wasn't allowed to register for second semester because he didn't pass first semester's minimum requirements. Am I the jerk for not canceling my wedding because my sister-in-law's due date is close to our wedding date? My sister-in-law is 2 months pregnant and she's due on August 6th. Mine and my fiance's wedding date is July 30th. We've saved the date and booked every venue about it since May. Booking a wedding these days can be really hard since everyone is rescheduling after 2 years of constant postponements. My sister-in-law announced that she's 2 months pregnant last week. She also said her due date. We congratulated her and we were really excited. After a few days, yesterday we met with her again and she said she wanted to sit me and my husband down and discuss the cancellation or postponement of our wedding because of her due date. We were shocked and surprised since we never discussed or even implied the wedding would be postponed. We kindly said to her that we won't cancel the wedding and we won't be mad if she won't be able to make it because her due date will be close. She said she won't accept not attending her brother's wedding, so we have to make it work and look for another date. We explained we can't do it right now since every other date will be booked, and if we cancel or postpone, Then next wedding date available is after February 2023. She said fine, so be it. We should book it for then. My fiance and I were clear that we cannot and will not postpone. We've already prepaid some aspects of our vendors and we won't get all of our money back if we cancel. Also, I'm gonna be honest, we don't want to cancel or postpone either. The wedding has been booked since spring of 2021. We've almost finished all preparations for it, so we will have the last few months before the wedding more relaxing and chill. Also, my sister-in-law doesn't have an active role in the wedding. She's the groom's sister, but she has no duties she'll have to carry out. She can attend and sit in a chair to feel more comfortable and leave whenever she gets tired. She can also choose not to attend all get-togethers if she doesn't feel comfortable. Even if she had duties, I'd find it perfectly reasonable for her to back out. My in-laws have all gotten involved now, and they're trying to pressure us to postpone the wedding because if we don't, my sister-in-law will probably not attend, and she thinks it's unfair to not be present in her brother's wedding. My fiance and I have not changed our minds, but my sister-in-law claims we are very selfish for not thinking about her feelings too and changing the date. Am I the jerk for not postponing or canceling the wedding? I'd have said, well, why didn't you consider our wedding date when you conceived the baby? Are they or any of your family who's pressuring you going to pay the cancellation fees, etc. to move the wedding to another day? I doubt it. You're not the jerk. The wedding is booked. I hope you both have a lovely day. Remember, it's your special day, no one else's. This is what I came here to write. Like, save the dates have been sent out, deposits have been made, and sister-in-law is immediate family. She could have planned her pregnancy around the wedding. This is what my siblings are doing. I never asked, they chose to do this. This is on sister-in-law and making it about herself. Exactly, she's being a tad entitled. If she wants the wedding canceled so bad, maybe she could refund everything that's gone into the delayed ceremony. It was so easy to compromise, and she didn't. OP, not the jerk. 1. She's only 2 months pregnant, while the process of planning the wedding is almost certainly longer. She could have totally took your wedding date into consideration. 2. If you cancel for her, you're guaranteed to lose booking fees. It's not 100% certain that she'll give birth on exactly the due date. If she does give birth on the day of the wedding, you can still share it through video. The same cannot be said about fees. 3. She wants to attend, so you have to make it work? Sorry, the world doesn't work that way. She'll have 6 months to come up with a way to not miss out. 4. The wedding date is not set in stone. Due date is not. It's unreasonable to expect you to throw away money and plan your lives around a possibility. Support our channel by joining as a member today, and we'll give you a shout out in our next video. Or come watch this video next. You won't believe what Karen does in that one.